All right. Everybody, please open your Bibles to the book of Habakkuk. Book of Habakkuk. So, if you remember last week's lesson, we dealt with the first 11 verses of Habakkuk chapter 1. And you have Habakkuk. Remember, Habakkuk's the last prophet who exists before the Babylonians, or picking your translation, the Chaldeans, conquer the southern part of what we think of as the nation of Israel, which is the part that we call Judah. And Habakkuk lives in a time where there's wickedness all around him, and he is disgusted. He's bothered. He's challenged by the fact that this is all happening, and it appears to him that God is doing nothing. And so he says basically to God, "Where are you? You know, how, like, all this is going on, and you're nowhere to be found." And God's answer is, "I'm working. I have a plan, and if I were to fully reveal it to you, you wouldn't be able to embrace it. It's such an awesome plan." And so we look at week one and we ask ourselves this question, where is God? And the answer is He's working. And the second piece, today's lesson, a little different type of question, and the question is, who are you to question God and how He works? Who are you, or who am I, to question God and how He works? And the reason we ask that question is because, as we'll see here, beginning in verse 12, Habakkuk's not done offering his complaints to God. So we pick up in verse 12 of chapter 1, verse 12, just after Habakkuk gets his answer from God based on his first complaint. So remember, first complaint is, "Where are you? You're absent." And God's like, "Nope, I'm working." And in his answer, though, he basically says, "I've got the Chaldeans that I'm going to allow to come in, and they are going to be my justice. They are going to come in, and they are going to fulfill my justice in the land." And so Habakkuk responds to that, beginning in verse 12. It says, "Are you not from everlasting, O Lord my God, my Holy One? We shall not die. O Lord, you have ordained them as a judgment, and you, O Rock, have established them for reproof. You who are of pure eyes than to see evil and cannot look at wrong, why do you idly look at traitors and remain silent when the wicked swallows up the man more righteous than he? You make mankind like the fish of the sea, like crawling things that have no ruler. He brings all of them up with a hook, and he drags them out with his net. He gathers them in his dragnet, so he rejoices and is glad. Therefore he sacrifices to his net and makes offerings to his dragnet. For by them he lives in luxury, and his food is rich. Is he then to keep on emptying his net and mercilessly killing nations forever?" So Habakkuk has this new complaint, right? So God has given him insight into his plan, which is these evil Babylonians, these horrible, godless folks. Well, they don't follow the God, and we'll talk about that in a second. But you're going to allow them to come in and conquer us? So if you want, this is sort of Bible study 101 in this. You have to just follow verse 13 and following, when he says, so in verse 12, you need to look at the thems. There's two thems in verse 12, and the thems become he's throughout the rest of his complaint. And the thems and the he's are the Chaldeans. Okay? And it's basically, in verse 12, there's this question, "Are you not from everlasting, O Lord my God, my Holy One? We shall not die." Like, you're God. You can do whatever you want. You're going to work it out like this? You're going to let people who were wicked, but they're even more wicked, and you're going to allow them? You made us, and these people gobble us up, and you're going to like allow this. Notice this last piece in verse 16 when he's talking about this net and getting caught up in the net. He says in verse 16, therefore he sacrifices to his net and makes offerings to his dragnet, for by them he lives in luxury, right? Like you conquer and you take over people and you take their spoils. Then he says in verse 17, is he then to keep on emptying his net and mercilessly killing nations forever? Like, are you serious? You're just going to allow them to continue on and continue on and continue on. Now, look at 2:1. Look at chapter 2 and verse 1. This is where the whole lesson comes from, okay? Chapter 2, verse 1. I will take my stand at my watchpost and station myself on the tower and look out to see what he will say to me and what I will answer concerning my complaint. So this is Habakkuk saying, like, I got this complaint for you, God. I can't believe you're going to work it out like this. This is judgment. This is how you're going to reconcile all this. You're going to allow them to take us, like, you're going to do that? And this is chapter 2, verse 1 is Habakkuk saying, I'm going to sit over here. I'm going to watch this. Okay? But it's really like a statement of standing in judgment of God himself. Like, this is your plan? Let me watch this with a judgmental eye, with a sense of arrogance, as if he, Habakkuk, is able to judge God's plan. And so this is the point, and we're going to go through chapter 2 in a second, but just make sure that you're able to stay with this. This is sheer arrogance on Habakkuk's part. It's ignorance, it's arrogance, call it what you want. But who are we as God's creation to question how God decides to work things out? Who are we as God's creation to question God and how he works things out? We'll come back to that as we close. But now notice the rest of chapter 2. It's basically God's answer to Habakkuk's complaint. So first of all, God begins immediately to put him in check. Verse 2. And the Lord answered me, write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so he may run who reads it. For still the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end, and it will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come, it will not delay. Behold, his soul is puffed up. It is not upright within him, but the righteous shall live by faith. Or you might have the word faithfulness, which may be a better, more accurate rendering. Verse 5. Moreover, wine or wealth is a traitor, an arrogant man who is never at rest. His greed is wide as Sheol. Like death, he has never enough. He gathers for himself all nations and collects all his own peoples. Notice verse 6. This is now like first of all, God is saying to Habakkuk, I got this. Now you just need to be quiet, and I'm going to tell you how this is going to play out. Okay? And you just need to write it down. If you will, you're doing too much talking, too much complaining, and what I need you to do is just write it down and make it plain. And when it plays out on whose schedule? On God's schedule, that you may think is too slow, don't worry, it's going to play out. Okay, now about this truth in terms of the Chaldeans and how God sees them. So watch, verse 6. Shall not all these take up their taunt against him with scoffing and riddles for him and say, woe to him who heaps up what is not his own, for how long, and loads himself with pledges. Will not your debtors suddenly arise, and those awake who will make you tremble? Then you will be spoiled for them, because you have plundered many nations, and all the remnant of the people shall plunder you. For the blood of man and violence to the earth, to cities and all who dwell in them. Woe to him who gets evil gain for his house, to set his nest on high, to be safe from the reach of harm. You have devised shame for your house by cutting off many peoples, and you have forfeited your life. For the stone will cry out from the wall, and the beam from the woodwork respond. Woe to him who builds a town with blood and founds a city on iniquity. Behold, it is not from the Lord of hosts that peoples labor merely for fire, and nations weary themselves for nothing. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Woe to him who makes his neighbor drink. You pour out your wrath and make them drunk in order to gaze at their nakedness. You will have your fill of shame instead of glory. Drink yourself and show your uncircumcision. The cup of the Lord's right hand will come around to you, and utter shame will come upon your glory. The violence done to Lebanon will overwhelm you, as will the destruction of the beast that terrified them. For the blood of man and violence to the earth, to the cities and all who dwell in them. What profit is an idol when its makers has shaped it, metal image and teacher of lies? For its makers trust in his own creation, who makes speechless idols. Woe to him who says to a wooden thing, awake, to a silent stone, arise. Can this teach? Behold, it is overlaid with gold and silver, and there is no breath in it at all. But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. So let me explain first of all. I understand this is sort of a tough text. It's like what and what and what. So I'm going to give you some guideposts, if you will, some things to that maybe make it a little easier to consume, and we're gonna come home real quick with the big point. First of all, in verse 6, you see woe to him. In verse 9, you see woe to him. In verse 12, you see woe to him. And in verse 19, you see woe to him. Okay? Get that? So whatever you want to understand about all the in-betweens, make sure you understand that this is a series of warnings against the one being spoken about, and the one being spoken about are the Chaldeans. Okay? The Babylonians. Okay, this is a series of warnings to them. And so God's response to Habakkuk, who says, you're going to let them do this? You're like, they're worse than us. And you're just going to let them come in and take us? Like, is this just going to go on forever? They're just going to live in luxury, take over nations after nations after nations. And God's like, no, hold on a second. Shh. You just write down what I'm about to tell you. And it basically works like this. They are going to be God's justice against the Israelites. Stay with me on this. They are going to be God's justice on the Israelites for the wickedness of the Israelites. But is God a fan of the Babylonians? No. Is he favoring the Babylonians? No, because they're vile too. And are there woes or warnings for them? Yes, there's woes and warnings for them because they too will eventually perish for their evil. You get me? Okay, so let me give you just that. First of all, I got those woes, right? So then let's zero in on verse 16, because verse 16 helps start to bring it together in terms of understanding. Look at verse 16. You will have your fill of shame instead of glory. Drink yourself and show your uncircumcision. The cup in the Lord's right hand will come around to you. And that's really like a cup of wrath, okay? Like God's going to pour his wrath, his punishment, will come around to you, and utter shame will come upon your glory. So are the Babylonians feeling like they're riding high in glory? Look at us, we're conquering, and we're living off the spoils of our conquering. Boom, boom. He's like, yeah, but guess what? That's going to come to an end. It's going to come to an end. So I'm utilizing you as a tool of justice against my people for their sin. But don't worry, your glory is going to quickly turn to shame when I pour out my wrath on you for your evils. You got me? Okay. Notice now this that gives you insight into the Babylonians, which is why I have to sort of correct myself when I talk about godless. When I refer to them as godless, it's not that they didn't have things that they worship. It's that they didn't worship the one true God that created heavens and the earth. That's what I'm talking about. Notice verse 18. What profit is an idol when its maker has shaped it? A metal image, a teacher of lies. For its maker trusts in his own creation when he makes speechless idols. You see what they got going on? Right? Like so many other peoples over time, they created their own idols, and God mocks this. Okay? Even when the Israelites do this, he mocks this. This idea that you're going to go and you're going to be a blacksmith or a woodworker and you're going to fashion your own idol and then worship the thing you made. And it's like speechless idols. They're worthless. They do nothing. Okay. And yet you worship them as opposed to worshiping him. Look at verse 19. Woe to him who says to a wooden thing, awake, to a silent stone, arise. Can this teach? Behold, it is overlaid with gold and silver, and there is no breath in it at all. Verse 20. This is the key. All right. This is why we teach this lesson. But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. The Lord is in his holy temple. So, okay. Chapter 1, verse 12 through chapter 2, the very end. Habakkuk, a godly man, not understanding the wickedness around him and God's seemingly lack of response, complains. God responds, you think I'm not working? I'm working. I got a plan, and it's so amazing that you can't even embrace it, right? You can't handle the truth. Okay, like it's, and you have to Google that now because that's like a whole reference. But I've got an awesome plan. He gives Habakkuk a little bit of insight into the plan, and then Habakkuk says, "You're going to do what?" And then God says, shh, get your pen out and start writing. Let me tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to let them come in. Yeah, they're going to do this thing. But then I've got a punishment. I've got a cup of wrath for them as well. Why? Because they don't obey either. They've fashioned these gods. And then he finishes it up with verse 20. Listen to it one more time. But the Lord is in his holy temple. In other words, I'm the one in charge. I'm the one. You got my people in Judah not following me. They're disobeying me. And if you don't know all the ways that they disobey, I would recommend you talk to my son who's walked us through over several months and Wednesday nights, all the horrible deeds that the Israelites did under all these bad kings. He's like, okay, so you're not obeying me. And so I'm going to let these guys come in and be judgment on you, but they're not obeying me either. They're just my tool in this because they fashion all these gods and they're in that sense godless as well. But I'm on my holy temple. So you know what you all need to do? It's the very last piece. Let the earth keep silence. Have you ever noticed this? And you guys aren't going to like this, but it's a beautiful reference. Have you ever seen a homeless person with a dog? I've seen for years and years, homeless people with dogs, and they're just walking, and that dog's not on a leash. That dog's not on a leash. We got 3 dogs at our house. If we let them outside and we try to walk down the street with them without them being on the leash, you know what they're going to do? They're going to run all over the place, sniffing around, and biting on, eating on stuff, and they're going to do whatever. The last thing they're going to do is just follow us. Okay? And here's why I bring that up. We are like my dogs. We have been so well fed and so well taken care of that we are spoiled rotten and think that we are better than we really are. And when we get a little freedom, we want to use it to run away from the thing that has spoiled us. The Israelites were so taken care of by God that they took him for granted. And even Habakkuk thinks he can offer a complaint to God. That first of all, he thinks that he can question God. Look at all this nonsense going on. Where are you? And then if that's not bad enough, when God says, don't worry, I got a handle. Let me tell you how I got a handle. I'll give you a little glimpse. Oh, you're going to handle it like that? And so God has to put him in check. And the fact of the matter is, he's got to put us in check a little bit too. Because we have had our blessings are so innumerable that we think we can actually tell God what to do. No, God, I don't think you should work it out like this. I think this is how you should work out my life. And I think we need to remember the very last verse of chapter 2, which is God is on his holy temple, he's on his throne. He's in his holy temple. And everybody else, you know what we need to do? We need to just shut up. We need to stop thinking that we have the right to question our God. We need to stop thinking that we have the right to dare look at God and say, I deserve better. God, how dare you allow these things to happen to me? Do you know who I am? Because in doing that, we act just like those Israelites who got so pompous and arrogant over all of these generations of their relationship with God, with him providing for them and providing for them and providing for them and providing for them, that they had become spoiled and thought that they would always have him, regardless of how much they turned against him. And God finally gave up, finally quit. All right, you guys aren't ever going to get it right, so I'm going to allow these vile Babylonians come in and conquer you, destroy you, wipe you out, take you into captivity, because maybe then you'll understand how good you have it with me. We look at the world around us, and all of us can start to develop a list and say, well, this isn't fair. This isn't fair. This isn't fair. My life shouldn't have. This isn't right. Why should I have to go through this? Why should I have to endure? Why should I have to struggle with this? This is not fair. This is not fair. This is not fair. This is not fair. We need to shut up and remember that God is in his holy temple, raised high and lifted up. And whatever he allows to happen in your life doesn't mean he's condoning it. Doesn't mean he's recommending it. Doesn't mean that he's promoting it. But if he's willing to allow it, we need to embrace that he's willing to allow it and shut up and just keep walking as close to him as we possibly can. But never fall into the temptation that we dare look at God and say, why would you let it work out like this? It is not our place to question the workings of God. It is not our place to condemn the workings of God. It is not our place to dare look at God and say, why would you let it play out like this? It is our job to be silent and walk. Okay, so this is the end. Go back to verse 4, chapter 2 and verse 4. I want you to see that I'm pulling this straight from scripture. Look at verse 4. Behold, his soul is puffed up. It is not upright within him, but the righteous shall live by faith, or the righteous shall live by faithfulness. Do you get me? You get me? See, the righteous will not always understand how it's going to play out or why it's going to play out that way, but the righteous will continue just to walk in faith. You see? You are not walking in faith when it always plays out the way you wanted it to. Your opportunity to walk in faithfulness to God is when God is working it out in a way that you never would have planned, and yet you still just keep walking with him. Do you see what I'm saying? That's the point. That's the point. See, Habakkuk dare question God's presence. First complaint, God, where are you? God says, I'm right here, I'm working. And then he says, oh, you're going to work it out like that? Well, that's not how I would do it. And God's like, shut up. Let me tell you. I'm up in my holy temple. I'm on my throne. and however I choose to play it out. The whole earth. You Israelites, you have been my chosen ones, yes? But you need to shut up too, because I'm the shot caller. I'm the one in charge. And however I choose to play it out, you have no right to claim is unfair. You have no right to claim is in some way an injustice on your part. You have committed sins. You have defiled me. You have done unrighteously. And I am choosing to allow the Babylonians to come in and wipe you out. And you don't get a say in the matter because I'm God and I'm in my holy temple. It's just as true today in 2020. I may love how God is doing things. I may be confused by how God's doing things. I may be disgusted by how God, I mean, whatever, but I need to learn to be silent and just say, my Father is working and he's working it out, and I do not get to question how he's working it out. He may do it fast, he may do it slow, he may go to the left, he may go to the right. But as long as he's working it out and I trust that he's working it out, the righteous will live by faith. And what we tend to do, and this is the struggle, and this is what this is your lesson right here, okay? But this is the struggle. The struggle is we want all the answers, and we want to be able to agree with all the answers. And neither are true. God doesn't give you all the answers, and many of the answers are things you would disagree with, things you wouldn't map it out. You wouldn't map it out that way, which is where faith lives. Faith lives in trusting that God knows better for you than you know for yourself. And that's the response to Habakkuk. It was true then and it's true now. Let's avoid the temptation to say, God, this is so wrong. Why are you letting this happen? And just say, God, I know you love me. I know you're there for your righteous. I know you're there for the faithful. And I know this is an opportunity to let me demonstrate my faithfulness to you, no matter what the circumstances may be. That's your lesson.